So I've been doing a lot of content on the Russo-Ukraine war lately, just because a lot of stuff has been going on. We have the Battle of Bakhmut, we have arms running out, perhaps on Ukraine's side, the various Western countries not having anything else to send them. We have General Milley announcing the war's over, everybody can go home. We've got all kinds of other stuff. Biden making speeches, Putin making speeches, the 1 year anniversary of this whole mess. And I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe I'll do a video just talking about some of the stuff that's delusional that I hear from the pro-Russia crowd. Like, it's not an invasion, guys. It's a special military it's a special military operation, kind of like how Vietnam was a police action. That Ukraine is like a neo-Nazi state because the Azov battalion exists. I get that they're a neo-Nazi group. I mean, like the entire country, people will say, and like try to do conspiracy theories about that, or even just stuff like, oh, it was an act of aggression when Ukraine invaded territory that they thought was legally part of their country that had been occupied by a foreign power. Like, there's a lot of things to kind of talk about, but that got put off when this popped up in my Twitter feed this morning. And this is the cringiest thing I think I've ever seen. I'm serious. I can't think of anything cringier. Like atheist Reddit posts, bronies, people posting Evola quotes, niche micro e-celebs with Pokemon avatars. Like, that stuff is all pretty cringe, but this is a new level of cringe, to be honest. Now, as a side note, this is not a direct quote from NATO. That is, a NATO staff member did not manually write this, but this is a quote of a journalist that they put up that they clearly agree with, that they're using their Twitter page that has 1.7 million followers to promote. So, I mean, I'm saying that just in the interests of honesty, but I don't think it really matters that much. I know people are going to post that in the comments section, and it's fair enough to give the proper context. Okay, so we're going to scroll down here. Once again, I'm going to warn you guys, this is the cringiest thing I've ever seen. I might even have trouble reading this. Okay, here we go. Ukraine is hosting one of the great epics of this century. We are Harry Potter and William Wallace, the Na'vi and Han Solo. We're escaping from Shawshank and blowing up the Death Star. We are fighting with the Harkonnens and challenging Thanos. Oh, like this. When I look at this, I thought that this was a troll post. I thought that like someone, like it was a fake NATO account and they had or they had photoshopped this together, and that this was like a whole soy boy meme and like the whole global H slur or something like that. I was even going to respond and say, look, this isn't funny. This is too like, it's too just blatant and tacky, and it's just a polemic. Like, no one's going to say something like that. No one's going to say that, like, the Ukrainians are Harry Potter and William Wallace. It's kind of interesting that William Wallace is listed there because he's a real person, unlike the rest of the examples that are fictional. But let's just take a step back. This is NATO. This is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is probably the biggest military alliance on Earth. And they're posting like about Harry Potter and the Na'vi and Han Solo, and they're fighting Thanos. They're referencing like crappy Marvel movies. This is what they've been reduced to. This is like, if you were like a terrorist, if you're Al Qaeda, if you're Venezuela, if you're Russia, like, how do you not look at this and go, this is just a fucking joke? Like, really? These are the guys I'm going to have to take on? And they're comparing like this war to the Marvel movies? Now, I could pull the big like fake outrage thing and say, how dare they trivialize a conflict when all these people are dying? But I make jokes about death and destruction all the time. Lots of people do. You have to have a very dark sense of humor to get through life in one piece. So, but it's not even that. It's they just don't take it seriously. Like this is something that some like shit poster on 4chan would make as a joke. And you have NATO, fucking NATO, putting this up as like one of their premier, like on their account. And this has like 13 million views. I think it was only 3 million this morning when I screenshot it. 13 million people watched them say that. I don't know. My grammar's. Is this fighting against the Harkonnens or fighting with the Harkonnens? Like, are they saying they're fighting alongside the Harkonnens to fight Thanos? Because that's like that's a crossover I could get behind. Like Vladimir Baron Harkonnen and Han Solo teaming up against Thanos with the Na'vi and William Wallace and Harry Potter. As somebody pointed out, I thought Harry Potter was like something you couldn't reference. So I guess NATO is like transphobic now? I don't even know. So that is the post. These other things are actually pretty cringe too. We have the domino effect might be felt along the world. Moscow tried to divide Ukraine, but achieved the opposite. Ukraine is left playing David to an aggressive Goliath. Because receiving military aid from the United States and the rest of Europe makes you the underdog. I get it; they have a small. But still, there's a certain irony to it. Once you've reached the front line, training improve your odds, so can survive the practice. Let's see here. A true people's army. Let's look at some of the responses. Are pretty funny. Star Wars reference. We got Putin and Zelensky as a Navi. We have one of the all-time favorites. Ron Paul saying, "Explain this shit." Like it's just a joke. And maybe just to take a spot. So a lot of people really hate NATO in these circles. They talk about it like committing war crimes and it's evil and it's an international terrorist organization or whatever you want to say. I kind of view NATO a bit like how I view the EU, where it was created, I think, for a logical purpose. People, in particular America, were tired of Germany and France having a cataclysmic war every 20 years, every 20 to 30 years. And everyone was tired of having to get involved with it, be it the Napoleonic Wars, the Franco-Prussian War, World War One, World War Two. There's a number of other just smaller conflicts in between. 30 years war, 7 years. There's been a lot. And people were just tired of it, especially with industrialized warfare. And they're like, let's just create an alliance that has Germany and France in it, and we can hopefully put a stop to this. So I get it. People were really tired of the whole thing. There's also the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union alone could probably, it's debatable, but probably without the US, the Soviet Union would have been at least a match for the rest of Europe, if not able to just kind of crush it. So getting a combination of the like democratic capitalist countries together to fight against a common foe, I mean, that made sense. You could even argue after the end of the Cold War, sure, the Soviet Union's gone, but we have this largely functional military alliance. People in Europe aren't going to war anymore, so let's just keep it in place. We can maybe extend it to the rest of Europe, and this will be, along with the EU, a tool for maintaining peace. And once again, I'm not necessarily even against that. I think it does make a lot of sense. The issue is it was weaponized to serve like a purpose beyond what it was initially intended to serve. At least in my opinion. We can talk more about the Yugoslav wars later, but a lot of people would argue that NATO intervening in the Yugoslav war, which is essentially an internal conflict at that point, the communist state had broken up. I don't know how you want to count Milosevic. It's the whole thing was just a mess, and a lot of people said NATO had really no role in intervening there, and that's fair enough. There's been a number of other cases. I actually am going to kind of defend the. I think NATO was fully involved in Afghanistan. It's very confusing because you'll have NATO and then you'll have like sub coalitions within it. But in Afghanistan, it made sense at least because you could argue the U.S. was attacked by Al Qaeda, who was in Afghanistan. So there is actually like a direct linkage there. It's not like NATO directly intervened in Iraq or something. But I think especially over the last 20 years or so, the U.S. has just turned it up to 11 with regime change, with just colored revolutions, with forcing countries to adopt neoliberalism, forcing them to adopt social liberalism, forcing them to change, overthrowing what you could argue is democratically elected governments, or at least governments that represent a plurality of the will of the people. And so a lot of people just really hate NATO now because rather than just serving as kind of a general alliance that was put in place to stop the Soviet Union, like I said, a lot of people think it just doesn't really have a purpose in the post Cold War environment. And it's tried to make a purpose for itself, and making a purpose for itself is invading or military or otherwise carrying out coups and regime change in countries that are pro-Russian or illiberal, and it's become a leading force of evil in the world. The complaint the U.S. always has had, which is fair enough, is that they've always carried like more than their weight in the alliance. That a lot of the like more pacifist European countries who are part of NATO get the benefit of U.S. security guarantees without actually contributing the amount of money they're supposed to be contributing, and that money can go to welfare programs and other stuff. So the U.S. has always kind of felt like NATO's scamming them. If the U.S. was to withdraw from NATO, though, it would just probably merge with the EU. But yeah, it's something I just have very mixed feelings about, and I don't really know what the solution is. Because if you were to dissolve it, once again, there's a fear that without some sort of unifying force in Europe, you're just going to go back to having petty wars. I don't know if that would necessarily happen, but like I said, I think there was a rational basis to create NATO. Definitely, this point in time, it's probably doing more harm than good. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is this post so cringy, so like unbearable? Does NATO deserve to be dissolved solely based on this? I'm just going to read this once again. I've actually been avoiding my eyes. Let's. Ukraine is hosting one of the great epics of this century. We are Harry Potter and William Wallace, the Na'vi and Han Solo. We're escaping from Shawshank and blowing up the Death Star. We are fighting with the Harkonnens and challenging Thanos. Someone made a good point that most of those people died. Um, but it is what it is. So God bless everybody. I'm sorry if you fell out of your chair from the cringe. I'll talk to you all real soon.